Alrighty, Shane, over to you.
Okay. Well, before I kick off, I might pay my respects to the traditional owners on which we're virtually meeting, the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So kicking off, my name's Shane Gaddes. You'll hear more about my background as we go through. This is a little talk I did for Stuart Allen for the University of Third Age, and I've just adapted it a little bit for this today. Feel free to jump in with questions, comments as we go through. So the title of my talk is Ocean Yacht Racing, Ocean Cruise or Indentured Labour. You can choose the outcome when we get to the end. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small fishing port called Scarborough in Queensland, just north of Brisbane. My family were fishermen. So at a very early age, I was out on the water. At that stage, I got terribly, terribly seasick. So I was a bit of an embarrassment to my mariner family. Up until about 17, I suffered from quite crippling seasickness, and then at that stage it went away, and I've never been seasick since. So I'm quite blessed. At that point, I learned to sail in sabos, which are the older version of the Optimist. Some misadventures along the way. I used to get home from school, take my boat down, and go training. One evening I went out training and my mast fell down in a 25 knot westerly. I had to swim to a beacon in the middle of Moreton Bay and wait. And I waited and waited. And at about 10 o'clock, like the Air Sea Rescue came and rescued me and took me home. Needless to say, there was more controls put over my training, after school training activities after that, with flares and call-ins and those sorts of things. I did a lot of dinghy racing through my teens in lasers, Europe dinghies, sabos, 420s, those sorts of things. Some success in teams racing, actually. We won a state, national and inter-dominion title in about 93. Then I went on to sail etchels and yachts and started ocean racing. Unfortunately now most of my activities are confined to Lake Burley Griffin, where I sail a laser in the elite fleet that we have there, with mostly led around by Bruce in his with his wily skills. And unfortunately, in more recent times, I'm confined to virtual regatta inshore with Steve and his motley crew of an evening, which is quite enjoyable. It's often quite aggressive form of sailing. So in terms of my offshore sailing career, I started out in sort of 36-foot yachts, doing the Brisbane to Gladstone. I think I've done 20 of those. I've done over 70 ocean races now, international, domestic. The longest one that I've completed was the Transpac from Los Angeles to Hawaii in July last year. The longest one I started and didn't finish was the two-handed Melbourne to Osaka race in 2006. We got to Sydney. We were leading the race. We got to Sydney and the rudder bearings failed and the boat started to take on a lot of water. So that was an unfortunate event for me. The pinnacle of my sailing was last year, where we were fortunate enough to win the Cedar Hobart yacht race on the Rykel 66 Alive. Alive is a form of blackjack. It's a light, very light, very narrow downwind boat. So if we get an upwind Hobart, I don't want to be doing it on Alive. But I've been sailing on Alive since 2015. I've done stints on bigger and smaller boats, and I'll just go through some of the features of success in Alive. So for this crowd, I probably don't have to tell people too much about the Cedar Hobart, but there's been 75 races now. I didn't update that after the last one. 8 attempts for me. I've finished all but one of those, and one of the attempts I was disqualified before the start. So what's that make it? 6 finishes, 1 disqualification, and 1 collision on the start line. It's widely considered one of the hardest yacht races in the world. Most of the races that I've done have been relatively easy. I did one very, very hard one, was my first race, where I did it in a 40-footer, and we went upwind pretty much the whole way. We had a bit of a reach the first night, and then it was upwind for another 3 days, and it was hard. I had the owner of the boat vomited in my face twice, and it was really just a terrible experience. As most of you know, in 1998 there was a significant tragedy occurred where 71 of 115 yachts retired and 6 sailors didn't survive. My offshore sailing career spans both sides of that, and I've seen the significant improvement to safety in offshore sailing since then, and there's been a very gradual but important improvement in safety over that time. We now need to go and do sea safety survival courses every 5 years, I think it is. The amount of safety gear you need to wear, the safety focus, the change in the way that the boats operate in the races has significantly improved, and it's really pleasing to see. So things don't always go well. Those of us that are a little bit older will recall the Scandia Wild Thing issue in about 2006, I think it was. I did 3 seasons on Wild Thing, and I sailed with people that had that were forced to get into the raft off, I think about 100 miles off Tasmania. They were leading the race at that stage too. They were actually beating Oates. What happened there? The modern canting keel boats, when the keel ramps fail, they have locking pins in them now, but Scandia at that stage was one of the world's first canting keel boats, and the keel ram failed and the keel swung loose. They were lucky. They were lucky to get out without any serious injury, but it just shows you the sorts of things that can go on in a Hobart race. It's not always going to go to plan. So what are the critical elements to success in ocean racing? Based on my experience, and as I said, I've done it right from the smaller end of the fleet to the top end in the 100-footers. You need the right boat, and the right boat means that you're going to have to spend a lot of money. You also need a boat that's just not fast but rates well. So it's a balance between speed and rating, which means you just can't go and put the biggest sails on it. You need to find a boat that has the right balance of speed, rating. You need a very solid team. And a very solid team doesn't just mean you need the world's best sailors. You need a diversity of skills, experience, and attitude. So you need, and I'll go through these in a little bit more detail later as we go through. You need a pretty solid strategy. So you can't just turn up on the day with the same sails you race with every weekend and hope to win. You need to have thought out the crew size that you want, the sails that you need. After the start, you need to have an adaptable set of tactics. I mean, it's only 2 days Hobart for the quick boats, but if you make a mistake, if you get on the wrong side of a shift, or if you don't navigate a transition very well, your race is done. The other thing you need seamless implementation. So crew work. So an example on a boat like a Live, if you're doing 20 knots average boat speed, if you make a mistake and you lose half an hour, then you've lost 10 nautical miles on your opposition, which means they're in a different weather system and your race is pretty much done. And of course, you need a pinch of luck. Every time when you watch the Hobart finish, there'll always be a question mark around what is the Derwent going to do? Are people going to get through the Derwent with breeze, or are they not? The year that we won, which was the year before last, we got through the Derwent with not too much light air. Last year we got parked up in the Derwent and we ended up 4th, but we could very well have run two in a row if we had air all the way through the Derwent. So how important is teamwork? Well, the race can go from 48 to 100 hours. So, for example, Transpac was 156 hours. That's a long time to be 4 hours on, 4 hours off. So on a Live, we've slowly over the years reduced the number of crew that we sail with. So in the Hobart I did with them in 2016, we had 15 crew. In 2018, we had 12 crew. That means that there's no room for people that aren't pulling their weight and people that don't fit into the broad vision for the crew. One of the most important things is fatigue management. So we need to carefully monitor our own fatigue, but we also need to monitor those of others and balance the loads. So as I said earlier, small mistakes can be costly. So if you're doing 20 knots, that's 1 nautical mile in 3 minutes. You can't recover that time against a handicap system. So if you're not moving at maximum speed, you're not going to be able to recover that time. The year that we won, we raced almost boat for boat, raced Wild Oats 10, which is the other Rycopew 66, with a full crew of female professionals all the way to Hobart. So we could see them. We could either see their nav light at night or we could see their boat the whole time. So 48 hours of just pedal down racing. It was like we had a rubber band attached to each other. Crew dynamics are critical. Communication and culture. So culture is important in terms of people need to be able to enjoy their sailing. You can't just have a team of rock stars that hate each other. You've got to have a team of people that get along very well and all understand their role and fit in well. The year that we won, we had 7 pros and 5 amateurs. We now have all pros. I'm the last amateur left in the crew. I would have played you, if we were in the yacht club, I would have played you a little video now, a little clip, and it just shows it's a clip of a TP52 going along, doing 15 to 20 knots with a shoot up, and then seemingly no mistake made, and they've rounded up, they've gone ahead to win, and the next minute they're trawling the spinnaker and they've got to drag it back in, so their race is done. Small mistakes in high pressure environments can result in quite big problems. There's a little line there at the bottom that says there will be a time when you need to be rescued. Not this last Hobart, but the one before that, the one that we won, as we were going across Bass Strait, we were driving downwind with a A2 spinnaker on, not going that fast. The breeze was building, and we had an A34 furling sail on the rail ready to go. That sail probably weighs 50 to 80 kilos. As we went through the jibe, I was the spinnaker trimmer, and I was pulling the sheet in on the new jibe, and the skipper pressed the wrong button on the canning keel system, and the keel canted to the wrong side. So the whole boat didn't go through with the right amount of ballast. The crew that were transferring that sail across lost control of it, and it fell on me. I was then rapidly going over the side with an 80-kilo sail on top of me. And if people hadn't have jumped down quickly enough, actually the first person that jumped down actually jumped on the sail, which made my problem significantly more serious, then I was looking at the prospects of going over the side in Bass Strait with a 50 to 80-kilo sail on top of me. So things were looking pretty grim, but people got to me on time. That spooked me a bit during that race, actually. I don't normally get concerned about those things, but that was a close thing for me. So crew positions, most of you as sailors are pretty familiar with this, but I'll just go through our crew and where they came from to give you a sense of sort of the diversity we had in the crew. So we had 12 crew. We had a bowman, and then we fly our bowman in from Italy. We had a mid-bow who's an amateur from Tasmania. The pit, we had a Kiwi pro he actually sails on Team New Zealand. He's a grinder on Team New Zealand. We had an amateur crewman also from Tasmania. Headsail trim, we had myself as an amateur, and we also had a guy called Kinley Fowler, who is one of the crew on Tom Slingsby's F50. The main trimmer was an amateur. The main traveller was a pro, an Australian pro. The principal helmsman is a cat sailor from New Zealand. The navigator was a Dutchman. The tactician was a pro from Australia, and the runners was the owner. So he was, I'll put him in as an amateur, but he's paying the bills. So going through fatigue management. So we have a watch system, which most of you would be familiar with. You try to balance the skills. So we normally have a driver, a trimmer, and a bowman. So in my role, I normally go with the strongest driver, and then I will trim for 4 hours straight. So I will sit underwater most of the time, and I will trim the spinnaker or the jib for a 4-hour watch. So you can guarantee you're going to get 4 hours on, but you can guarantee you're also not going to get the 4 hours off from the next watch. And the reason for that is the sail changes and other exercises always require more than one watch to change. So the off watch is also responsible for packing the sails. So if you change a spinnaker, or if you change a spinnaker to a furling sail or back, the off watch is responsible for packing it all away while the on watch is putting the pedal down. On a boat like a Live 2, the off watch is also responsible for bailing out all the water. These things leak. They leak like a sieve. So you get to the end of your watch, you get off your wet gear, you eat, you try to go to the toilet if you can, you try to sleep. On things like the Transpac, you get to a point, because you're doing so many jibes or so many sail changes, where you have to make a choice about whether or not you want to eat or whether or not you want to sleep. Quite often, I was making choices about sleeping rather than eating, because you can try to eat snacks and things while you're on watch, but you can't catch up on sleep. So I lost about 6 to 7 kilos when I did the Transpac race, because you couldn't get enough food into you. And of course, there's on the top right-hand corner of the slides there, you can see the pipe berths. They're not terribly comfortable. On board Alive, it's a hydraulic powered boat. So whenever you press the button for the winches, the motor revs and you can hear it grinding. Those winches are right above your head in the bunks. And you always sleep with your feet forward, because if you go through a wave and the boat accelerates, which they do, you can quite easily hit your head. So the other picture there is a picture of just a wet gear hook. So food, energy is critical, but you can't afford to carry too much weight, and there's no refrigeration. All there is a small camping stove, run off butane, and freeze-dried fruit. You have that, you have dried fruit and snack bars and lots of chocolate. There's 12 spoons, so you can see the spoon rack there. The spoon rack is also your sunglasses rack. So off watch, you put your sunglasses in that hook and you have a number. So you get issued 1 spoon, 1 water bottle. There's 4 coffee cups. So there's only one half of a watch that can have coffee. Coffee, you've got to be careful of. Coffee seems like a good thing to do. If you drink coffee anywhere past the 2-hour mark on your watch, somebody like me, you won't be able to sleep the next off watch. So if you're very tired, you have coffee at the beginning of your new watch, not at the end. And you also have to be careful not to eat too much sugar at the end of your watch, because while you might get a bit of a hit for it, it'll mean that you won't be able to sleep on your next off watch. So what are the conditions like on board? There's a little meme there that I've made up. The expectation is that it's going to be champagne sailing and you're going to be cruising along. Often Cedar Hobart is very, very cold. The first day is very hot often. So you'll often start in a northeasterly sea breeze and it'll be hot around Christmas. The further south you go, the worse it gets. So the problem is when it's hot, down below, it's very hot. The motor runs the whole time. There's no insulation. It can be very hot. in a race like the Transpac, imagine the smell of 12 men that have been in a confined space, that haven't showered in over a week, and have been wet, dry, on and off. It's quite pungent. And the noise, as I went through earlier, modern ocean racing yachts, there's no insulation in them, so they're very, very noisy. And the navigator is often at the nav station the whole time, so there's lots of lights downstairs, so it's very, very challenging to sleep. That would have been a little video where I would have showed you through a live in the Transpac where you're allowed to stack, but I'll have to skip through that one now.
Shane, we'll try and share those in the chat or something afterwards so people can have a look. Yep. or tie them back in.
Yep. So getting to some of the interesting parts in terms of tactics and strategy. So navigation and weather. So all of the top boats now carry very, very highly trained and educated navigators. So we had for the Hobart race that we won, we had Wouter Verbrack. Last year we had Andrew Cape. I've sailed over the years. I've also sailed with Adrian Cahalan and a number of other top flight navigators. So they are going through up to 2 to 3 days before the race. They will start to send the crew, the trimmers, and the crew boss routing, and they will send you what they think the race is going to be like. Then they will. Have I skipped it? Let me just check something here. Just make sure I get this in the right order. Apologies for this. Yep. Okay. So 2 to 3 days beforehand, they'll be sending you what they think the forecast will be. If you can see on the bottom left-hand side, these are 2 different routes that the model is spitting out. So they'll normally have 3 or 4 different weather models that they'll run through, and they'll then be looking to see whether or not how much the weather models align and what sort of certainty you've got around which route you're going to take. That then feeds into sail selection. So they're doing that 2 to 3 days out, and you still haven't selected your sails. You don't know which ones you're going to bring. So and then once we get into the race, they're risk managing and they're actively monitoring it. So in terms of sails, it's not like a laser where you've just got your one sail or you might have 2 rigs. With sails, it's more options is more speed. But if you carry sails that you, sorry, is there a question?
I was going to say, how many sails do you have to choose from on the boat? Like,
oh, I'm just stepping through that now.
Okay.
That's all right. So we'll go through and then you can ask a question after that. So I've just got a little diagram here. So normally you've got 5 spinnakers to choose from, but you take 2. So you'd have an A1.5, which is a light VMG spinnaker, then an A2, which is a heavy weather VMG spinnaker. A4 is your very heavy weather VMG running spinnaker. And A3-4 is a heavy weather reaching furling spinnaker. And then there's an A6. So we took, for the Hobart race in 2018, we took an A2 and an A2.5, which is a slightly heavier A2. We took an A3-4 as well. We blew up the A2.5. It was only up for 15 minutes and it blew to pieces. The bow speared into a wave. The spinnaker kept going and we pulled it in tatters. So that's like a $25,000 sail that was destroyed. So in terms of furling sails, you normally have a masthead 0. You will also have a fractional 0, and Alive has a jib top, which is a furling. It's the same size as a jib, but it sets off the prod. So we took in that race, we took a Mo, and I think we also took the jib top. In terms of jibs, there's 5 jibs to choose from, but you only take 2. So there's a J1, J2, J3, J4, and J6. So in the Hobart race that we won, we only took a J2 and a J3. We didn't take a heavy weather jib at all. And then you can see as you go down through the rigs, we would also have inside of those, we'd have a spinnaker staysail and a jib staysail. So when you're reaching, you'd have a mow and a jib staysail inside it, and when you're running, you'd have the spinnaker up and a spinnaker staysail. So you've got to optimize it for the forecast. We only took 10 sails from all of those options, and we used every one of them. And I'll show you the selection process for sails now. So on the top left-hand corner is our routing that we were doing just before the Transpac race. All of those routes are based on different weather variables. And from that, the Navigator chooses a probability curve on the top right-hand side. So if you look on the left-hand scale, there's the true wind speed, true wind angle. Oh, sorry, that's the true wind speed. Along the bottom is the true wind angle. So 145 is VMG running, 40 is on the wind. And then within that matrix, it shows you how much time you're going to spend in your race. So on that race, on the Transpac race, we're going to spend 26% of our time at 145 degrees in about 18 to 20 knots of breeze. So that helps you select your sails. So that normally it'll spit out on the bottom right-hand side. You can see the sails and the number of hours that you might do. These are from different races, so they're not all the same. And then on the bottom left-hand side is a sail selection chart, which shows you wind again on the left-hand axis, angle on the right-hand axis, where your optimal sail selection is. So here is a light medium jib, a fro. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, we can, Shane.
Yep. Mo's here, A2, A15, A4. So that's how you, and the computer will tell you, but this is based on real data. So every time you go sailing, the boat logs and the Navigator puts in what sail you've got on, and it'll tell you what the most efficient angle and what the most efficient sail is. And that gives you targets that you trim to. So the boat will also give you angle targets and speed targets that you need to meet. And if you're not meeting those, then the Navigator comes up and yells at you, saying, your target is this, why are you sailing higher or lower than this? Quite often it's because there's the weather conditions or the sea state means that you've got to sail a little higher, and he will come up and chastise you quite badly. Often there's not much he can do about that, and he has to go back and reconfigure his plan. So attributes of a good team. As I went through, you need talent. So you need the ability to compete at an equal level with what is at the upper echelon, all pro crews. But all pro crews aren't always the best option. You need energy and enthusiasm. So simply getting on the boat and going through the motions isn't going to win it for you. And I've seen both pro and amateurs that will get on the boat and not really want to put in the effort. They just want to be able to get either the paycheck or the t-shirt at the end of the race. The most important thing for me that I've noticed over the years in sailing with big boats, because the 100-footers will sail with up to 20 people. We're sailing at around 12. Respect. Respect is the most important part. Quite often you'll get on a boat and you won't have met the people you're on the boat with before. You need to make sure that there's a mutual amount of respect there. Otherwise you end up in what you like to call a pissing contest, where each new crew that comes on board feels the need to dominate the ones when they come on the boat to show how important they are to get the best roles. If you do that, the crew will not operate well as a team. Got to make sure that the morale's high and that people are working together. Resilience, that's an important thing as well. So things won't always go to plan. you need to be able to recover physically as well as mentally. Often you'll find yourself in a place where you might have put 5 miles on a boat by working hard through the night, and then you'll sail into a hole and they'll sail up to you or even past you. You can't give up. You just got to keep going. You've got to find a way to dig deep and put those miles back down again. Communication. So it's often dark, it's noisy, it's wet, it's rough. You've got to make sure your communication's clear and succinct. It can't, quite often the worst things that you see on boats, big boats, is you're going through a sail change, something has broken or jammed on the bow. It's a long way back from the bow to the stern. The skipper wants to do something, the bowman can't let him do it. Things break down pretty quickly, and then people can get hurt there quite quickly if people are pulling things with big hydraulic winches and the communications aren't clear. So they have to be clear. And the last one I'll just go through is you really need a healthy internal competition. So it's healthy competition is one where the two watches or the parts of watches are competing to drive the boat hard, but not in a way that is putting others down. So you need a healthy competition with encouragement, not criticism. And I've seen both parts. And if you get to a stage where people are, what our top speed was so much quicker than yours, you guys are dreadful, that's not helpful. A healthy competition is, oh well, our top speed on the last off watch was 32. Let's see what you guys can do. And just in terms of how fast these boats can go, the highest speed I've seen on a live was 35 knots boat speed. So you get to the point where once it gets over 30 knots boat speed, it's actually frightening. The boat spends more time underwater and under extreme load. We got to a point in the Transpac race where we'd been pushing for 3 days and we were just tired, and the Volvo sailors, they're just fearless. I was getting to the end of my resilience where it was like, we've got to have to slow this thing down, otherwise we're going to die. We didn't die, they were right, I was wrong, and I still get ridiculed for that. I think the answer was, if the boat's not built for it, it shouldn't be out here, which for me was, well, that's kind of not helpful because we are out here. We're a long way out here, and if the boat breaks, we're going to be left out here. So just a bit of an addition on resilience. Those people will know, well, some of you will know that Wouter Verbrack was one of the Volvo sailors that made a mistake a few years ago. They were sailing, I think they'd just gone around the bottom of one of the capes and they were sailing up into the Indian Ocean. He was navigating at the time. He didn't zoom in on the chart. He wasn't using paper charts. He was using an electronic chart, and he didn't zoom in close enough, because as you zoom into some of those electronic charts, it steps up into a different category, and he put Vestas on a reef. If you're a navigator and you put your boat on a reef, if that's your job, it's going to be hard to get the plum gigs after that. So his misfortune was our fortune, because he came to sail for us, and he is an outstanding navigator. He is now, again, back up in the upper echelons of the sport, but he could very well have just packed it all in at that stage and said, well, I'm obviously not going to be a navigator anymore. And I think I might leave it there. So that's about as far as I got to. So we won the Hobart race in 2018. We backed up again with more professionals and less amateurs in the 2019 race. We would have, but for a small shutdown where the TP52s got through without any wind shutdown like we had in the Derwent, we could have won it 2 years in a row. So we were very fortunate to have 2 very good races with 2 very good crews, and an owner that continues to pay the bills and let us take his race yacht sailing. Okay, I might leave it there and open it up to any questions.
Thanks heaps, Shane. That's yeah, just an incredible presentation. Really appreciate you giving us a bit of a rundown on all of that. So look, obviously here in Canberra, it's pretty hard to sort of make the connections that you've been able to make and get out there and do this sort of sailing. What sort of steps do you think a dinghy sailor wanting to get into offshore racing, should be looking at taking? Should they be heading up to Sydney each weekend, or how do they get started?
That's the way I would do it. So you need to get into a consistent crew. I was fortunate that I went straight from dinghies into small ocean racing yachts, so I was able to sail each weekend. From Canberra, that will be very challenging, and one of the things that I'm facing at the moment is if a live stop sailing, or if I stop sailing on it, that will probably be the end of my ocean racing career for a while, because it would be very difficult for me to get back onto a decent crew. So the best option, I'd say, would be to go up to Sydney each weekend and establish yourself as a good solid crew and go from there.
If I could just make a comment on that, you can hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Good day, Peter.
Canberra people were lucky back in, when was it, the 60s, when Tiki Dalton was around, and he had his, what did he have? He had 2-3 different keel boats. And that's where people like George Snow and Eric Adrian's got a start in ocean racing. But the Canberra Ocean Racing Club, I think, still operates, Steve, doesn't it? But I don't know that they compete these days. I think it's more of a social sailing. They did compete in the Sydney Hobart for a year or two.
Yeah. I think they still do get out there and do the occasional Hobart every couple of years. They buy a new boat and it takes them 3 years to get it ready, and then they're about ready to sell it again, I think, is the problem. But sorry, Shane, if you stop sharing your screen, we'll be able to see a few more faces, I think.
Okay. How do I do that?
Down the bottom, share screen.
Stop share.
Stop share. There we go.
There we go.
There's everyone.
So people are always looking for good, reliable crew. It's having organised crew in the past, having somebody that is reliable and willing to commit is one of the most important aspects. Because it's even with 36 footers, you've got to put together 8 people, and you really want at the lower, or sort of at the beginner level, you want the same people each week, because you build up your coordination. If you have to teach somebody the ropes each week, it's really tricky. It makes it really hard for you to compete well.
And what's it like coming back to Canberra, Shane, and jumping in the laser? Is it just a totally different sport, or you're going through the same mental games, or?
It's a bit trickier, actually, because in a big boat, you have a fairly defined role. So you're not often looking for shifts. So you're not thinking about where things are going to go for the start. People of that intelligence feed comes to you. So people are saying, breeze is top right, we're going to go up here, we're going to jibe, this is the strategy. So often I find when I'm sailing my laser, if I come back after a regatta away, I forget to think about what I'm going to do on the beat. So I'll be waiting for somebody to tell me, and I'll go, oh, actually, that's probably too late now. So you've got to get back into the mode. And I find ways to fix that is if I communicate internally the way that they do it on the big boat. So they'll say pressure in 3, 2, 1, breeze on now, looks like a header, we're going to go up here and tack. So I do that mentally inside my head as if the other people had said it on the big boat.
On the big boat, Shane, do you move positions around so you get a feel for what other people are doing, so you can understand that in the position that you regularly do?
No.
Okay.
No, you get in trouble if you stray off your patch. So it's in that level, you're a specialist, and you're there because of your specialist capability. There are a few that'll move around, but Like I up until Alive, I was a driver, and they don't let me drive that. So there's a pecking order and a specialists, and you don't move.
Shane,
And
John
so
O'Donnell. Sorry.
how often will you go up and train on the boat for, say, the next Cedar Hobart? Or is it sort of jump on every now and again?
It's
As-
every now and again. So, for example, the boat's in the shed at the moment. They've taken the keel off. They're taking the bowsprit off. They'll build a bigger bowsprit. They'll do a whole heap of refurbishment. The next race that we were going to do, if COVID was not an issue, would be the Brisbane to Hamilton Island race. So we might go and do 1 or 2 days training before that. Then we'll do the Hamilton Island race. Then we'll do 1 or 2 days training before it's not Hamo, it's Early Beach Race Week. Then there'll be a slightly different crew, and they'll do 1 or 2 days training before Hamo. They'll do Hamo.
Yeah.
Then we'll do 2 or 3 days training before Hobart, and then Hobart.
Okay. But you guys are pretty established in what you're
Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah. John, you had a question?
Yeah, Shane, thanks. I was just thinking, it came up last or Christmas time on a trip down from Sydney to Eden. The question over what decisions one particular watch will make prior to the handover to the next watch, and it came up: should we actually change, or should we make a decision to change sail now, or leave it to the next watch? And there wasn't pressure on to do it there and then. And someone said, well, maybe it's better to let the new watch come on, get up to speed, then let them make the decision to do it. Is that something that's you come across, or is it critical, or is it?
Our navigator tells us when to change, and if you're off or on, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
If he says, well, it's time to go,
Yeah.
even if you've just gone down, or if you're due up in half an hour, that's it. It's happening.
Yeah, I guess that's critical when times of the essence and speed, maximum speed. Outside of that, does that have any sort of relevance, do you think?
It does. So if not on this crew, but if I was sailing on a crew where you needed to balance people's fatigue, so they weren't all top tier sailors, and you weren't going to get that much more out of it, it would be much safer to wait till the normal transition between two watches to do the sail change if it wasn't that critical. Even to the point you've got to be careful not doing highly technical things straight after people have gotten out of bed. So you're always better off making sure the people that are on watch and have been on watch for a while lead most of the maneuvers, because the people who've just gotten out from downstairs, their eyes haven't adjusted, their bodies haven't adjusted to the sea state. So making sure that the frontline people are generally the people that have been on watch for longer. That's the normal way that I would operate it, because you can see, and I have seen people that come launching out of the bottom hatch. All right, let's do this. Give me the wheel, and they've just their bodies aren't adapted to it, and that's when mistakes are made.
Yep.
Shane, I imagine there's a difference between a boat that has 4 coffee cups between the crew and one that has a coffee cup each.
Yeah, there is, and I've seen all levels of it. But I think safety is the key thing for those sorts of crews. It's making sure that people aren't put in harm's way. I mean, it's very easy to come up, slip over, get something tangled around you. Also, changing helmsmen unnecessarily is a risky thing in certain conditions too.
Shane, it's Sue. You mentioned the importance of communications. Physically, how does that happen? I mean, going from one end of a large boat to the other, we have enough trouble on the castle, probably because my other half shouts a lot. But how does it physically work on the boat when you're trying to get a message back? You're all wired for sound, or how does it work?
It's relayed.
Right. Oh God.
Yeah. So you have your bowman who's normally hands-on and your mid-bow. Then you've got your pitman, who's normally, often your pitman is your crew boss. So the person in the middle of the boat is often in charge of the maneuver, not the skipper, not the navigator. The crew boss, normally in the pit, calls the shots. So the tactician and the navigator might say, I want to achieve this. They then have to shut up and let the crew boss run the maneuver. Where things go badly is where people overstep. The navigator or the tactician or even the helmsman assume an authority they don't have and start to tell people what to do. Then you've got two streams of communication, and that's pretty much where things go to custard. So when things operate the way they're designed, the crew boss telling people, relaying information forward and back, that works well. It doesn't take much for it to break down, and when it does, it doesn't end well.
Thank you.
Shane, the navigator's position sounds pretty specialised. Do they follow a similar watch pattern to everyone else, or are you just not allowed to make a decision while they're asleep for four hours on course and things like that?
So the navigator will float, so they don't stand a watch. They come and go as they please. In an easy race, they'll get lots of sleep. In a hard race, they'll get no sleep. So what will happen is the navigator will come up frequently in times when they need to. So if there's a critical transition you're going through, you get constant feedback from them about what they want you to do and where they want you to go. In a more standard period, they'll brief the oncoming and offgoing watches. So you'll wake up just before you go up, you'll wake up the navigator and say, okay, we're going on. Where are we? What mode do you want? Do you want a high mode, a low mode? Is there going to be a change? How far away from the change? Important things like, is there anything shallow around here that we need to be aware of? And then we'll go, often you'll get one of the not driving drivers to go down and check throughout the watch as well. So there's a constant loop of feedback depending on what's coming up.
Perfect, thanks.
Shane, steering the boat, how many of the 12 on your boat are allowed to steer the boat?
Probably about 4, maximum of 4. And they're very good drivers. Sorry?
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, just 2 questions basically. One was you said that there's a pegging order to life on board, but I guess there's a pegging order as far as, I don't know, boats as well. Like, how does it work? Do you put your name up, or is it advertised that Ichiban, for example, is looking for someone of your skill set and off you go, or do they sort of turn around and do a bit of a job search for the people that they want?
It's all word of mouth and reputation. So I was sailing on far 40s when I moved to Canberra, and then a spot came up on Wild Thing. They just needed the trimmer. They were looking around. I was asked to put my sailing resume in, so I sent. I have a list of all the races I've done and how I've gone. I sent that to Grant Warrington. He said, "Great, come along." And then I sailed with him for 3 years. That program capitulated. Some of the crew, some of the pros from Wild Thing went on to Alive. And after the first season, they didn't have the right balance of people, and they needed people. I think the way it was framed to me was they need people like me, less professional, but easier to get along with, and more that you can build a cohesive crew. And I've been able to maintain my position despite the number of the high turnover I've been able to stay on. Whether or not, if Alive stopped sailing, I would need to put the word out that I was available. Coming from Canberra, not being able to sail anywhere in a consistent way would be pretty tricky for me. So if it was a smaller boat in Sydney, sailing each weekend with family and work commitments, I'd probably struggle. But the way that Alive sails quite inconsistently but very intensely, I'm able to balance that.
So it's a bit like that app that Steve's put together. You know, I'm a crewman. I want to go out for the day, or I'm the skipper and I'm looking for some crew. So there's a little bit of that, but it's like a job application type process.
It is, yeah.
The
And
second-
normally the pros will tell other pros. So it'll be, you put your hand up and say, "Oh, I need a crew." "Oh, well, Shane's there, but he can come and do that," and he doesn't charge you. So
Sure. The second question is, you know, in the big boats, the Wild Oats and the Ichibans, etc., it could be, you know, 2 or 3 day race. But some of the other guys, I can't remember the exact timing, but it's like 6 days or something to get through. Is that same routine followed on those other smaller vessels? Oh gosh,
same routine.
You really want to make yourself up near the top then, so you get
you do.
quickly.
So my first Hobart was 4 days and 10 hours.
Oh.
But they often do different watch systems. So they often do 3 hours on, 3 hours off, which is, I find, easier.
Thank you.
Shane, what's the process for professionals? I guess obviously being professional, they're full time. That's their full time job, and they travel the world, I presume. I'd imagine there'd be a lot of experience built up. They're linked into all the right networks.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a picture of the expertise of these guys, or guys and women. What's your view on that? How do you see that?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Oh, it's, I guess partly a comment. You're obviously, are you considered a pro or amateur?
No, I'm an amateur.
Right. Okay. So if you wanted to go pro, you'd be, I guess, moving to Sydney. Probably difficult with a family.
Yeah.
How much sailing would you have to do to get to that point?
So most of the pros are either they're doing a lot of international sailing, so they're flying around, they're doing circuits in the US, they'll come over and do the East Coast races in Australia, they'll do Hobart, they'll go over to the Med and do those sorts of races, so they're consistently moving around, and they often, based on what I've seen, they often do a lot of rigging work and those sorts of things in the downtime. So they develop a really high skill set for rope work and rigging, and they'll often work for a rigger in the downtimes as well.
Or sail makers, or
yeah, most of the trimmers are sail makers, so sail makers or riggers, but they don't often maintain. They've come out of sail makers to become full-time sailors, but they don't often be a full-time sail maker and a full-time pro.
Okay, thanks.
So not many pro sailors on JobKeeper at the moment then, haven't been with them for more than 12 months.
Yeah, that'd be tough. It would be really tough. They'd be really hurting at the moment because
So how do they work out
income.
a pay rate for these guys? Are they on a contract usually, or is it's not a union, I assume?
No, they're on a day rate. And they get paid a different rate offshore. Yeah, a day rate. They get paid a different rate offshore sailing, inshore sailing, and boat work.
And presumably the top guys can command more than the others.
Oh yeah.
Differential depending on experience and competence. Yeah.
And do you have a big fitness regime, Shane?
Not as big as it should be.
When
when I had time, I'd go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. I'd sail on a Sunday and I'd ride. Now I haven't got time these days. I just run. I do a lot of running.
Okay.
And I sail a laser on Sundays. That's enough.
Guys, we might wrap it up there, unless there's 1 or 2 more questions. Give us a wave with a hand. But if not, yeah, thank you so much, Shane. We'll give him a virtual round of applause for that one.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, really interesting presentation, and we'll put it together as a bit of a recording and see what we end up doing with it. And we might try and share those 1 or 2 videos that didn't translate to Zoom very well as well. So thanks so much. So 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a boat builder, Jeff Comfort, having a bit of a look around at how to put it all together. And yeah, that should be an interesting format, trying to fix boats on camera. But hopefully we'll see you all then.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Steve.
Thank
Thanks,
you, thank
Shane.
you.
And thanks, Steve, for setting this up. It's been
Yes.
terrific.
Thanks, Steve.
For PowerPoint too, because it was on my phone. It was really hard to see.
Yeah, we can share the PowerPoint as
Yeah,
well
we'll
if
share all
Shane's
that,
happy
Sarah.
with that. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.